Hi, it's Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. I'm back with my pans and plans. This was a big week in Congress, especially for me, because as you may know, I do chair the Subcommittee on Consumer Protection and Commerce. And after years, literally, at least 2-3 years of working to get a national privacy bill that would protect consumers online, we finally had a bipartisan hearing on a bipartisan draft of legislation that would actually provide security for consumers of all sorts online. We know that 81% of consumers feel that they don't have real control over their own data. And one study said it would take 76 days to actually read all the privacy reports of the average person's online databases. So I think that we have to do better to make sure that we make those guarantees overall. And so we know that the European Union already has a policy. We know that many states are working on that, but this would be a pretty standard national policies for online consumers. Among the things that it would do on day one, consumers will have, companies will have a duty to only collect the minimum amount of data that they need for a particular transaction, can't ask for extraneous data. Consumers will have the right to access, corrupt, delete, and transfer your data. There will be no data sharing information unless you give consent to any third parties. Most of the members of Congress really focused on children, protecting them from harm and exploitation online. And one of the most important things was raising the age of children who are covered from age 13 to 17. So many more young people will be protected. And what that means that you can't have advertising that is targeted specifically toward them online. So we're going to be doing a lot about protecting our kids. I know a lot of parents are concerned about that as well. And then, of course, there's the issue of gun violence. And I told you last week, a package of 8 different pieces of legislation that passed the House of Representatives are very, very significant. We're going to continue to push all of them. But I think the good news, maybe not the great news, the good news is that there has been a compromise in the United States Senate. 10 Democrats and 10 Republicans got together and came up with a package for the first time really in decades. We will now have some legislation. Let me tell you what it does. For one thing, it would also do what we call a red flag bill to prevent people who will be of danger to themselves or others. There will now be a process to make sure that when those individuals are identified, that they will be prevented from having a gun that could hurt themselves, a suicide, for example, or others. So there will be a red flag law. The Senate has also agreed to end the boyfriend loophole. Right now, if someone has been convicted of domestic violence, that person, in order to keep them from having a gun, has to be a spouse. Now, anyone who is in a relationship that has been convicted of domestic violence will not be able to purchase or own a gun. So that's an important one. There will be a federal ban on what we call straw purchasing of guns, and that's very important for the state of Illinois. I think I mentioned to you last week, because so many of the guns that we have in Illinois are trafficked. So trafficking and straw purchasing will be outlawed. So that will keep some guns from out of state from coming into Illinois, where most of the gun violence and the gun deaths are caused by guns that come from out of state. We also have legislation that would require more background checks for children, really, between the age of 18 and 21. You know that the shooter that killed 19 children was 18 years old. There is a recognition that we need to do more scrutiny on kids that are at least a bit older. And 21 seems to be a time when actually there's a reduction in these kinds of mass shootings. So it's a beginning. There's also a good deal of money that goes into mental health services, something that we've needed for a long time. I've reminded you that before, though, that people who often are truly mentally ill are more likely themselves to be the victims rather than the perpetrators. On the other hand, we know that there is really a pandemic of depression and mental health issues that could lead someone to suicide. And you know that more than half of the gun deaths are in fact suicide. So the fact that we will put more resources into mental health services is progress. Now, I would have loved to have seen that we do something like get a ban on assault weapons. This is still on the table. I know that the House of Representatives is going to be having a hearing on that. The fact that these military-style weapons, as used in in many of the mass shootings, have been on the street, it's crazy. And so we have to do something about that. So we're making in steps. We're finally cracking the ban on doing anything about gun violence. And that is good news. So I've been a leader in the Congress on trying to reduce the number of fatalities and injuries on our highways, which I'm sorry to say are at a record high right now. So I was able to get into the infrastructure bill that passed last December, major infrastructure bill, legislation that dealt with automated driving systems that would actually help drivers to avoid crashes without actually having to do anything. These would be automated within the, built-in within the cars themselves. This is a good thing, the more that we have those systems in cars that are newly built. But it requires the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, we call it NHTSA, the agency that actually designates exactly what is the requirement for cars to have in their systems. So they released information yesterday that as of right now, there have been in cars that use that are testing these kinds of programs, 367 crashes. Some of them have hurt pedestrians and bicycle riders and individuals, of course, and there have been several deaths as well. The biggest problem has been Tesla. Of those 367 crashes, 273 come from Tesla. Now, one of the things that's really problematic, I think, that what Tesla calls those systems is Autopilot. Now, my husband is a pilot, and when you hear Autopilot, you think that means you don't have to really pay attention, and that is not true, particularly in this testing stage right now. And so we want to make sure that NHTSA comes up with these rules of the road, these regulations for automakers, so we know exactly what has to be required in these automated systems to make sure that we really are protecting people on the road. So we had a press conference yesterday. The advocates were very strongly asking that we get these rules as soon as possible. We don't want to have to wait a number of years as these deaths and crashes increase, and that more experiments are done on our highways without the definitive rules. We're moving on to healthcare and prescription drug prices. I want to tell you, there is I think, little known player that helps to decide how much pharmaceuticals, our life-saving drugs, are going to cost. And they are called pharmacy benefit managers. And what they do is to manage the benefits on behalf of insurance companies. And there are examples that have been found over the years that the role that they played actually does have a role, sometimes in unfairly increasing the price of our drugs, which, as you know, is one of the top issues that people all across the country are facing, not being able to afford their prescription drugs. So the Federal Trade Commission has just decided to commission a study to take a close look at these pharmacy benefit managers, to see what role that they are playing and to make sure that that's a constructive role. And so now that we have 5 members finally appointed, that's the full complement of members of the Federal Trade Commission in place, then we're going to begin this investigation that I hope will help to control and lower prescription drug prices. I also wanted to just announce it is the 10-year anniversary of what we call DACA, which is the program that was established for young people who have come to this country as immigrants with their parents, not a decision of their own, and to give them certain rights to be able to have a job, to be able to go to school. We called those DACA recipients dreamers. These are the young people who dream one day to be able to become citizens of the United States of America. And the DACA program is the beginning of making that happen. So it's been 10 years. My district, the Chicago area, has a lot of DACA recipients. Work is happening right now. Negotiations are happening right now to see how we can make this program go forward. Of course, it's just the beginning, really, of the changes that we need in what is essentially a broken immigration system that is preventing families from being united, preventing literally millions and millions of people who have been in the United States of America for a pathway to citizenship. But the DACA program has been very, very important, especially for our young people who wanted to be able to get ahead as in the only country that they have known, the United States of America. Sunday is Juneteenth, June 19th, and it marks the day where the last slaves who hadn't heard about the Emancipation Proclamation, which happened in 1863, they didn't hear about that until 1865. That happened in Texas. I think there were some other southern states where people were enslaved without knowing that actually emancipation had happened. And so really what Juneteenth is a celebration of the end of slavery, the end of enslaving people in the United States of America. I know that my colleague Sheila Jackson Lee, who was the author of the bill to help make Juneteenth Juneteenth is a holiday, we'll be having a big celebration. But I think all of us should mark the day that the more we can end oppression and slavery, the more we should celebrate that in the United States. As usual, I want to end with an update on the coronavirus, and to say that after a pretty steep increase that has been seen now in Illinois, we are seeing, I was going to say slow and steady, I hope steady, decrease in the numbers. Actually, Illinois reported 5,737 new cases and 5 deaths on Wednesday. And so, we should hope for the best, but continue to take care. And finally, let me just wish all dads a happy Father's Day. I hope that any of the fathers in your life have a wonderful celebration. I know I'm looking forward to, in my family, congratulating all the dads, and have a wonderful summer weekend. I'll see you next week. Thank you for watching my video. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where my handle is @Jan Schakowsky.